Let's talk about each of these men individually, because the pattern only becomes undeniable when you understand what each one was specifically doing and what happened the moment they were removed. June 30th, 1960. The Congo gains independence from Belgium after 75 years of one of the most brutal colonial regimes in human history. A regime so violent, so extractive, so deliberately cruel that it shocked even other colonial powers at the time. And on Independence Day, standing at the podium while the Belgian king sat in the front row expecting a polite, grateful speech, Patrice Lumumba looked directly at King Baudouin and told him the truth. He reminded him of the beatings, the hangings, the humiliations, the Congolese men whose hands were cut off for failing to meet rubber quotas, the generations of people worked to death so Belgium could get rich. He said it all, out loud, in public, on the day of independence. The Belgians were furious, the Americans were alarmed, and Lumumba had been prime minister for exactly 30 minutes. Now, here is what made Lumumba truly dangerous in Western eyes. The Congo is not just any country. It is arguably the most resource-rich nation on Earth. Cobalt, copper, uranium, coltan, the mineral inside every smartphone and electric vehicle on the planet. 2/3 of the world's cobalt supply sits in Congolese soil. The uranium used in the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki came from the Congo. The minerals under that country are worth trillions of dollars. And Patrice Lumumba intended for those minerals to belong to the Congolese. He had been prime minister for 10 weeks. The CIA's response was immediate. In August 1960, 2 months after independence, CIA Director Alan Dulles sent a cable to his station chief in the Congo. The cable said that Lumumba's removal must be an urgent and prime objective of covert action. Not monitoring, not containment, removal. The CIA dispatched its chief chemist, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the same man who ran the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program, to the Congo, carrying vials of poison. The plan was to place the toxin on Lumumba's toothbrush or in his food. At the same time, the CIA was running a covert program called Project Wizard, channeling hundreds of thousands of dollars and military equipment to Congolese politicians and military figures willing to move against Lumumba. Among them was a young army colonel named Joseph Mobutu, a man the CIA had identified as their most reliable asset in the country. On September 14, 1960, 10 weeks after independence, Mobutu staged a coup. Lumumba was placed under house arrest, then captured, then transferred to the Katanga province where his political enemies were waiting for him. On the night of January 17, 1961, Patrice Lumumba was driven to an isolated spot in the forest. 3 firing squads were assembled. He was put against a tree and shot. Belgian police officers supervised the execution. Afterwards, a Belgian officer named Gerard Soti dissolved Lumumba's body in sulfuric acid so that no grave could ever become a shrine. He kept one of Lumumba's gold teeth as a trophy. His daughter found it in a box decades later. In 2002, 41 years after the execution, Belgium formally apologized for its role. The United States has never apologized. The CIA has never been held accountable. And the man Belgium and the CIA installed in Lumumba's place, Mobutu Sese Seko, went on to loot the Congo for the next 32 years, one of the most corrupt and brutal dictators in African history, fully backed by Washington for every single one of those years. Because under Mobutu, the minerals kept flowing in the right direction. Togo is a small country, thin strip of land on the West African coast. No enormous mineral deposits, no vast natural resources. By the standards of the Congo, it barely registered on the Western radar. So why was its president assassinated? Because of a piece of paper. Sylvanas Olympio was not a revolutionary in the traditional sense. He was an economist, educated at the London School of Economics, former general manager of Unilever's African operations, fluent in German, English, French, Portuguese, and Yoruba. He was, by any measure, one of the most sophisticated economic minds on the African continent, and he had identified something that cut to the heart of what French colonialism actually was: the CFA franc. When France granted independence to its African colonies, it did not actually release them. It handed them a currency, the CFA franc, that was pegged to the French franc, backed by the French treasury and administered from Paris. 14 African nations were required to deposit 50% of their foreign exchange reserves into an account at the French central bank. France controlled the exchange rate. France controlled monetary policy. France could, at any moment, devalue the currency and wipe out the savings of an entire country. It was colonial control without colonial administration. Independence on paper, dependency in practice. Olympio saw it clearly, and he decided Togo was leaving. He began building the architecture for a sovereign Togolese currency, backed not by France, but by the German Bundesbank. He had negotiated the arrangement. He had the support. He had set a date. 2 days before he was due to travel to Paris to sign the withdrawal papers, soldiers broke into his home at midnight. He ran. He made it as far as the gates of the United States Embassy in Lomé and tried to get inside. The embassy was closed. Sylvanas Olympio was shot dead on the steps of the American embassy at dawn on January 13, 1963. The man who pulled the trigger was a sergeant named Etienne Ayadema, a former French colonial soldier who had been refused a place in the Togolese army by Olympio himself just months earlier. France immediately recognized the new government. Ayadema himself eventually seized full power in 1967 and ruled Togo for the next 38 years, one of the longest-serving dictators in African history, with consistent French support. Togo never left the CFA franc system. It is still in it today. You already know the broad outlines of Nkrumah's story, but the details of how he was removed deserve to be examined closely, because they reveal just how deliberate and calculated the operation was. By 1965, Nkrumah was at the height of his influence. Ghana was industrializing. Pan-African conferences in Accra were drawing leaders from across the continent. His book, Neo-Colonialism, which laid out in precise detail exactly how Western powers were maintaining economic control over nominally independent African nations, had just been published. The United States government formally protested the publication of the book and withdrew $20 million in aid from Ghana in retaliation. Think about that. The most powerful government on earth formally protested the publication of a book because the book told the truth. Inside the CIA, the assessment was unambiguous. Declassified documents describe Nkrumah as doing more to undermine American interests than any other black African leader. Not Soviet interests, American interests. Because Nkrumah was not trying to make Africa communist, he was trying to make Africa independent. And to Washington, those two things were functionally the same. The CIA station in Accra began maintaining what declassified documents describe as intimate contact with dissident military officers. The station was given a generous budget. It identified the men willing to act. It created the conditions, through economic pressure, propaganda, and direct encouragement, that made a coup feel both necessary and achievable to the men who would carry it out. On February 24, 1966, while Nkrumah was on a peace mission to Hanoi trying to end the Vietnam War, the Ghanaian military seized power. The operation was called Cold Chop. Nkrumah heard about it from the Chinese premier during a stopover in Beijing. He never returned home. The CIA officer who ran the Accra station, Howard Bain, received a double promotion and was awarded the Intelligence Star for his role in the coup. Inside CIA headquarters, the Accra station was given full, unofficial credit for the overthrow. A national security staffer wrote a congratulatory memo to President Johnson describing Nkrumah's removal as a significant benefit to American interests. Congratulatory, after a coup that removed the democratically elected leader of a sovereign nation. The military junta that replaced Nkrumah immediately dissolved parliament, suspended the constitution, closed his state-owned factories, canceled his industrialization program, and invited Western companies back in. Nkrumah died in exile in Romania in 1972. He never saw Ghana again.
The struggle continues. A luta continua! A luta continua! Contra o quê?
Against what? Against what must the struggle continue?
Contra o tribalismo.
Against tribalism.
A luta continua!
And what else must we struggle against?
Contra a ignorância!
Against ignorance.
Contra o analfabetismo!
Against illiteracy.
Contra a exploração do homem pelo homem!
Against exploitation.
Contra a superstição!
Against superstition.
Contra a miséria!
Against misery.
Contra a fome!
Against
Contra o
hunger.
pé descalço!
Against lack of clothing.
A luta continua
The struggle continues
para que sejamos todos homens iguais.
so that someday we will all be equal.
Sente-se.
Samora Michelle's story is different from the others. He was not removed by a coup. He was not shot by soldiers. He died in a plane crash. But the circumstances of that crash have never been satisfactorily explained, and the evidence that has emerged in the decades since points in one very clear direction. Machel was the first president of independent Mozambique, a country that had fought a 10-year guerrilla war against Portuguese colonialism and won. Under his leadership, Mozambique became a frontline state against apartheid South Africa, providing sanctuary and support to the African National Congress and other liberation movements fighting white minority rule across southern Africa. This made him one of the most dangerous men alive in the eyes of the apartheid regime, and the apartheid regime had extensive backing from Western intelligence services, particularly during the Cold War, when South Africa was framed as a bulwark against Soviet-backed liberation movements in southern Africa. On October 19, 1986, Michel's Tupolev aircraft went down near the Mozambican border with South Africa. 34 people died, including Machel himself. The South African government immediately claimed it was pilot error. A Soviet investigation reached a different conclusion. Their experts found evidence that a false radio navigation beacon had been activated near the crash site, a decoy signal designed to lure the aircraft off course and into the mountainside. The beacon was on South African territory. South Africa denied everything. No one was ever charged, no government was ever held accountable. But consider what happened immediately after Michel's death. His successor moved Mozambique away from its confrontational posture toward South Africa. The ANC lost one of its most committed and vocal supporters. The liberation corridor that Mozambique had been providing to Southern African freedom movements was significantly weakened. The apartheid regime survived for another 8 years. Of all 5 cases, Thomas Sankara's is the one that hits hardest. Not because the evidence is the most dramatic, but because of who pulled the trigger. Sankara became president of Burkina Faso in 1983 at the age of 33, and what he did in the 4 years that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. He renamed the country. Upper Volta, a name given by French colonizers, became Burkina Faso, land of the upright people. He sold off the government's fleet of Mercedes cars and replaced them with the cheapest car available in the country. He cut his own salary to less than $500 a month. He refused air conditioning in his office because most Burkinabe could not afford it. He launched a vaccination campaign that immunized 2.5 million children in a single week. He planted 10 million trees to push back the advancing Sahara. He built roads, schools, and railways using Burkinabe labor, Burkinabe resources, and no IMF loans. He refused to pay the colonial debt, arguing that the debt had been contracted not by African governments but by colonial administrators on behalf of European interests, and that the African people owed nothing for the cost of their own exploitation. And he proved it. In 4 years, Burkina Faso achieved food self-sufficiency. A country that had been dependent on food aid was feeding itself. France was watching all of this very carefully, because Sankara was not just running a country, he was running a demonstration, proof that an African nation could break from the Western economic system and not only survive, but thrive. If that proof held, if other countries looked at Burkina Faso and decided to follow, the entire architecture of France-Afrique, France's system of economic control over its former African colonies would begin to unravel. On October 15, 1987, Sankara was in a meeting with his cabinet when armed soldiers stormed the building. He walked outside to face them. He was shot 12 times.
The man who organized the coup was Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's best friend, his bandmate, the man whose parents had died when he was young and who Sankara's own family had taken in and raised as their own. Compaoré's stated reason for the coup was that Sankara was damaging relations with France. Within days of taking power, Compaoré had reversed every one of Sankara's policies. He privatized the state enterprises, he rejoined the IMF, he invited French companies back. He was warmly received in Paris. The commander of the hit squad that killed Sankara, a man named Gilbert Diendéré, was awarded France's highest honor, the Legion of Honor. France, to this day, refuses to declassify its files on Sankara's assassination. In 2022, 35 years after the killing, a court in Burkina Faso convicted Compaoré in absentia and sentenced him to life in prison. Diendéré received the same sentence. Justice came. 35 years late. France's files remain classified. 5 leaders, 5 removals, 5 countries left poorer, less free, and more dependent on the West than they were before. And in every single case, the replacement did the same thing. Opened the door, let the extraction resume, took the money, stayed in power for decades with Western backing. This was not chaos. This was not the unfortunate byproduct of Cold War anxiety. This was a system, and Africa was not the only place it was being used.
Before we go any further, if this video is telling you something you did not know, if the pattern you are seeing is making you look at the world differently, then you are exactly who this channel is built for. BKRanks exists for one reason: to follow the paper trail all the way to the end, to connect the dots that powerful people would prefer stayed unconnected, to tell the stories that do not fit inside the version of history that gets handed to you. We are not done yet. What comes next in this video is going to show you that everything you just watched did not stay in Africa. If you are not subscribed, hit that button right now, because this channel is just getting started and you will not want to miss what comes next. Now, let's talk about the playbook.